Chapter 23. Gabe sat in on the couch, idly tuning the old mandolin he'd brought back. He hadn't played it in years. The long weekend in New Jersey had been fun, as it always was. Returning home and making love to Elizabeth after several days of enforced chastity was even more fun. This time they made it out of the kitchen. Did it get any better? Great afternoon sex, a delicious dinner, and a quiet evening with the woman he loved. He wanted more of this. "Do you like living in New York?" he asked Elizabeth, who sat at the table working in one of her books. She looked up and smiled. "I like living wherever you are." He chuckled. "I like that answer. But if you had the choice, would you rather live here in the city or in a more suburban place, like central New Jersey?" "There are things I like about the city. I like Dr. Rose and the Sinclairs, but there are other nice things about not being in the city that I like, too. Why do you ask?" "Just curious." But it was more than curiosity. Gabe was considering looking for a job in a pediatric practice in the area where his family lived. Maybe buy a house and start a family. Maybe. If he wasn't a hospitalist, he would have more regular hours. Sure, he'd be on call once in a while, but that was nothing compared to working 7 nights in a row and barely crossing paths with Elizabeth. He started idly plucking a tune on the mandolin. It had been years, but the melodies came back. His fingers remembered the strings. Elizabeth stopped writing to watch him, closing her eyes for a moment, as if she were absorbing the melody. She picked up the tune quickly, humming as he played. "That's lovely. I love music. I love to dance." She stood and started swaying and dancing as he continued to play. In that moment, they were enfolded in a cocoon of music and the indescribable connection between musician and dancer. She was breathtaking to watch. Her right hand was extended over her head as she moved gracefully in the classic slow, quick, quick, slow, quick, quick combination of steps common to folk and country dances from all over the world. But even as she enthralled him, something nagged at him. Why had they never done this before? He had played for her years ago, but she had never enjoyed it so much or danced while he played. Then realization dawned. Elizabeth doesn't dance, ever, and she doesn't pray in Latin. All of the incongruous images from the last few weeks bombarded him in rapid succession. Elizabeth in the ICU, cowering from an ophthalmoscope, unable to read, gripping his hand in terror as they rode in the elevator, delighted by how the toilet worked, wanting to walk home from the hospital instead of getting into a car. Bras and panties had been foreign to her. She hadn't known how to use a phone. She didn't recognize a lot of ordinary foods. She had vehemently insisted that she was Catholic, but hadn't understood the concept of other Christian denominations, and she had no idea what a rosary was. Suddenly overwhelmed, he stopped playing. The first night he stayed with her in the hospital, when she'd been drowsy with pain medication, she had said, "I want to remember it all when I go back." Was this possible? Could this woman in front of him, who was confused and sometimes terrified by the world around her, who had a deep faith that Elizabeth didn't share, and who danced so beautifully, be another soul from another time? Could souls come forward? He'd always assumed they only went backwards. Dear God, that's it. She's a time traveler. She had remembered him and believed she loved him, but that must have been one of Elizabeth's memories. The fact that Elizabeth did love him only comforted him for a moment. If this girl had used the pocket watch, it meant Elizabeth's life was over. "I've lost her." The realization gutted him. "What's the matter, Gabe?" He looked at her for a moment, trying to convince himself he was wrong, but he knew with certainty he was right. "You aren't Elizabeth." I... You aren't. Someone gave you the pocket watch." "How do you know about it?" "Because someone, an old woman named Gertrude, gave it to me once a long time ago." Gertrude didn't give it to me." "Well, someone did." "No, Gabe. Gertrude gave Elizabeth the pocket watch." "That isn't possible. The person with the watch is only gone for 60 seconds at the most. If she were given the watch, she'd be back, or dead." "It didn't work that way this time. Elizabeth was needed for something, but I hadn't done the thing yet that would end in my death. She went back when she lost consciousness during the accident, but she dropped the watch. It stayed here, so time is equal. When the time comes, we'll be able to change back." "Then Elizabeth can return?" She nodded. "And she loves me?" "I think she does. I don't know how to explain how I feel if she doesn't." That should have given him hope, but if anything he felt worse. Why would he feel worse? The woman he loved was returning to him. That was when the horrible truth sank in. He didn't know if it was Elizabeth who he loved, or this soul from the past. "But you aren't Elizabeth, and you let me love you." She looked stunned, as if he had slapped her. Yes, never mind. I'm going out for a while. I'm sorry, but I need some space to think. I can't do that here. I don't know if I can stay here with you. I'm sorry." He grabbed his jacket and left. Elsie watched him leave, and it felt as if her heart had been torn to bits and thrown at her feet. She sank to her knees, sobbing. Why did this hurt so badly? She had been doing this for Elizabeth, hadn't she? Elsie had wanted to give her back a lost love, and she wanted to return to her own love. But the answer stared her in the face. "Because you don't want to return to your own love, and you don't want to give Elizabeth's love back to her. And now you know for certain you must." The truth completely shattered her. She sobbed on the floor until she had nothing left. Pulling herself together, she stood to look around at the little home she had grown to love. But it wasn't home without Gabe. His words echoed in the empty apartment. "I don't know if I can stay here with you." Right. She found Aldous Sinclair's card and picked up the phone. She dialed the cell phone number he'd told her to use in an emergency. He answered immediately. "Elsie? Is something wrong?" The sound of his voice started tears flowing again. "Duh?" "Elsie, what's happened?" "Gabe knows about the pocket watch. He left." "What?" "I'm sending a car for you. Dixon will be there soon." "Tell me what happened." "I'm not sure I know. We had a wonderful weekend with his family. He brought back his mandolin and was playing for me. It was beautiful, and I started to dance. Then he just started looking at me so strangely and said that someone must have given me the pocket watch." "How did he know about it?" "He said Gertrude gave it to him a long time ago." I explained what happened with Elizabeth and the watch and time being equal. I told him she can return. He wanted to know if Elizabeth loves him. I told him I didn't know how to explain how I feel if she didn't love him. "Then why did he leave?" "I'm not certain. He seemed angry that I wasn't her, but that I had let him... I'd let him love me. He said he needed to think, grabbed his jacket, and left." "Oh, my sweet girl. I'm so sorry." The lump rose in her throat. She didn't want to cry again. "Thanks, Da. I'll just gather my things so I'm ready to go when Dixon gets here." As she packed, she tried to tell herself that this had always been about Elizabeth, but she knew better. At some point, she, not Elizabeth, had fallen in love with Gabe. She left Elizabeth's computer in the closet, where it had been since the day she left the hospital. It would give them a reason to get together when Elizabeth returned. Elsie knew she should not feel so abandoned, but she did. When Dixon arrived, she made another call. She wanted to tell Gabe where she was going. She wanted to apologize. She wanted to say goodbye. He didn't answer. "This is Gabe. Leave a message." "Gabe, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to make you so angry. Thank you for everything you've done for me. I don't want to put you out any longer. I'm going to stay with the Sinclairs until, It shouldn't be much longer until, she glanced at Dixon, until I'm my old self again. Goodbye. I'll never forget all you've done. She hung up the phone. Are you ready, Dr. Quinn? Yes, thank you, Dixon. He picked up a suitcase and a shopping bag containing the overflow, and then held the door for her. After you, ma'am. She fished the key Gabe had given her from her purse and locked the door. She couldn't stop another tear from slipping down her cheek. She wiped it away hastily and left with Dixon. Gabe walked to a local pub. It was a Friday night and there was a good crowd at the bar, but he spied an empty booth in the back. He ordered a drink and sat there, trying to get his head around what had happened. He loved Elizabeth. He had for years. But when this girl entered his life, his feelings were more intense than they had ever been before. He hadn't quite understood how that was possible. He thought maybe he had pushed away his true feelings for so long that they came bursting forth more powerful than ever. But she wasn't Elizabeth. Elizabeth loved him. The girl couldn't have felt the way she claimed to feel otherwise. The problem was that he was no longer sure if it was Elizabeth he loved or the soul from the past. It really didn't matter. She was going back. He was losing her. No, Elizabeth was returning. Why would he think of it as losing this woman he didn't know? Because you do know her. You knew she was different from the start. Damn. He took a drink. Do you mind if I sit with you? Gabe looked up to see Gertrude standing by his table. She hadn't changed a bit since he last saw her over 12 years ago. Be my guest. She sat and arched an eyebrow at the sight of the drink in his hand. You once told me you'd never be a sick, drunk doctor. And this is just one drink. I have no intention of becoming drunk or sick. So, what has upset you enough to make you drink alone tonight? Don't try to tell me you don't know. I have no idea what's in your head, lad. But you know about Elizabeth. Yes, of course I know that. Then you know I've spent the last 5 weeks falling in love with someone I can't have. Again. What are you talking about? The girl, the soul that is in Elizabeth's body. I think I love her. Well, that's very nice indeed. No, Gertrude, it isn't nice. It isn't nice at all. She's only here until Elizabeth returns. She'll leave, and my heart will be broken once again. Now, that's the second time you've said that. What do you mean? He sighed, shaking his head. Years ago, when I went back, I fell in love with a girl there. He put his head in his hands. Dear God, Gertrude, nothing has ever hurt so much as that. Falling in love. Having to leave her. You could have stayed. Believe me, I considered it. I considered leaving my family and my education, everything, just to be with her. Why didn't you? My only skill there was as a musician, which meant traveling as a minstrel, and yet I had every intention of asking her to go with me. What changed? Several things. I would have been taking her away from her life and the things she loved. I also realized how very fragile life was, and what a gift I had been given. In the future, I would have had the ability to go to medical school and learn how to keep people well and save lives. In the past, I had no such opportunity. Suddenly, the musician's life didn't look so good to me. He cast her a sidelong glance. Which is what I suspected you intended for me to learn from the start. Gertrude smiled. I've said before, you're a good lad, but you could have stayed anyway. The choice was always yours. I could have, and I had almost decided to, but what? She disappeared. I tried to find her, but before I could, someone killed me. I whispered the return word just as I lost consciousness, and then woke in my own bed. I'd hoped to see you again to return the watch. I wanted to find out what happened to her. I wanted to know she was safe. And we haven't had a chance to chat. He nearly rolled his eyes. We haven't had a chance to chat. It had been over 11 years, but he wouldn't point that out. "No, we haven't." "Do you remember what I told you when you arrived in the 13th century?" "You said a lot of things." She chuckled. "I might have, but you asked me if there was anything else you needed to know. And you said, love is a marathon, not a sprint." "That's right. I'm not sure I understand how that applies here." "Do you not? Well, that's a shame." "Not terribly comforting, when I am on the verge of losing yet another woman I love." "Well, now let's think about that. Why do you think you're on the verge of losing her?" "Because she has to trade places again with Elizabeth." "But you love Elizabeth." "I do. At least, I thought I did. I'm confused. I think I might love the girl who's here." "It seems to me you ought to figure that out. If it's Elizabeth you love, 'tis Elizabeth who'll return to you." He shook his head. "I might have loved Elizabeth, but I'm fairly certain what I feel now is for the girl who's here." "The answer seems clear. If you love her and she loves you, perhaps she should stay." "You mean that the girl, whoever she is, might want to stay?" "Have you asked her?" "No." "Did you tell her you wanted her to stay?" "No." "Then how on earth would she know, lad? It seems to me the sorts of things one would find out when learning who she really was and what led her here." "What about Elizabeth?" "Elizabeth has decisions of her own to make." "But why would she choose to stay in the 13th century?" "I imagine for the same reason that you would have." "She's fallen in love?" "It's possible. Perhaps you shouldn't worry about Elizabeth's choices until you know your own heart, and that of the lass who you think you love. Fix today, lad." "Gertrude, Jesus! I have to get back to her. I was upset. I didn't ask her any of those things. I left to try to get my head around what I was feeling." "Then you're definitely in the wrong place." Gabe stood to leave, but Gertrude stopped him. "Will you accept a bit of advice from someone who's been around a while?" He smiled. "Love is a marathon, not a sprint?" She chuckled. "While that is true, I was thinking of something a bit more concrete this time." "I've clearly fouled this up, so I'll take any advice you have to offer." "Don't hold back. If you love this lass, tell her. Tell her you're sure it's her, and not Elizabeth that you love." "But what if she doesn't love me? What if she's married or has a family?" "You have to take that risk. But I suspect she believes you love Elizabeth, not her, and that it would be wrong to steal you away. She has a decision to make, and even if she is married or has a family, she deserves to know all of the facts before making it." "Everything? Even about falling in love before?" "Everything, Gabe. Tell her about your experience with the watch, and that you were willing to leave everything else you held dear behind for the lass you loved, but the decision was taken from you. Tell her how it caused your heart to ache. Tell her that you've fallen in love again, but now you're certain it isn't with Elizabeth, but her, and you fear losing her will be worse than the first time. Ask her to stay." "I will. I'll go tell her now. Thanks, Gertrude." He kissed the old woman's cheek before leaving. Gabe practically ran the few blocks back to his building. When he entered the apartment, it was dark. He slipped silently into the bedroom. If she was asleep, he wouldn't wake her. He stopped short and flipped on the light when he saw the empty bed. "Elizabeth?" he called, knowing there would be no answer. He would have seen if she were in the bathroom or kitchen. He opened the closet door. His heart fell. Everything but Elizabeth's laptop bag was missing. Where would she go? He pulled his phone out of his pocket, not sure who he intended to call, but saw that he had a voicemail message. He dialed and listened. "Gabe, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to make you so angry. Thank you for everything you've done for me. I don't want to put you out any longer. I'm going to stay with the Sinclairs until, well, it shouldn't be much longer until I'm my old self again. Goodbye." I'll never forget all you've done." "No, I can't lose you." He heard the despair in his voice as it pierced the stillness of the deserted apartment. The only Sinclair whose number he had was David's. He glanced at his watch. It was nearly 11. He only hesitated a moment before calling. "Hello? David, it's Gabe Soldani. What's wrong? Has something happened to Elizabeth?" "No, not exactly." "What does that mean?" "It means we had a misunderstanding. I went out for a little while. I needed to think." Gabe felt smaller than a cockroach. "I just got back and she's not here." "God damn it. How the hell could you let this happen? She's alone in New York somewhere? How long has she been gone?" "She isn't alone in New York. The message she left was that she was going to stay with your parents." "How did she get there? Or did she even get there?" "I don't know, David. That's why I'm calling you. I don't know how to contact your parents." "I'll call you back." David hung up on him. It was less than 15 minutes before David called, but it felt like an eternity. "She's safe. My dad sent Dixon and a driver for her. Soldani, I don't know what you did, but you fucked this up royally." "I don't need you to tell me that. I think I can fix it, but I need to talk to her." "Well, that's not happening. Not tonight, anyway. And frankly, tomorrow isn't looking good either. My dad couldn't be angrier if Elizabeth were one of my sisters." "Christ, David, you don't understand. No one understands. Please, I just need a few minutes." "You heard me. Not tonight. You work days tomorrow?" "Yes." "Dad said he'd call you tomorrow evening, after he's had a chance to cool down." "Damn it, David, this won't wait until tomorrow." "It's going to have to." "Then can you at least give her a message?" "I'm not promising anything, but what's the message?" "I was not angry. I was confused, but I'm not now. I love her, and more than anything, I want her to stay." Gabe hoped she would understand what he meant by that. Chapter 24. Just as David had said he would, oldest Sinclair called Gabe on Tuesday night. "I'm sorry, sir. Please, may I speak with Elizabeth?" "You are out of your mind, young man, if you think I'll let you do that before we've had a serious discussion. And that cannot happen over the phone. I will meet you at your apartment tomorrow after you're off work. Call this number when you are leaving the hospital." Gabe agreed. He called Mr. Sinclair and then hailed a cab. He had barely reached his apartment when the buzzer from the main doors sounded. When the knock came, Gabe checked the peephole. Oldest Sinclair, a very angry oldest Sinclair, stood at his door with his bodyguard Dixon behind him. He opened the door. "Good evening, sir. Thank you for seeing me. There's been a terrible misunderstanding. I don't want to hear anything from you until we are in your apartment." "Yes, sir." Gabe stepped back to let them in. Mr. Sinclair nodded to Dixon, who took up a post in the hall. Mr. Sinclair strode past Gabe into the apartment. "Please, sit down. Can I get you something to drink?" "This isn't a social call." "I know. Like I said, there's been a terrible misunderstanding." "Maybe. But you have a lot of explaining to do before I'll be convinced of that." "I'm sorry. Really, I am. But there are some things, lots of things, that I can't explain to you. I need to speak to Elizabeth." "Perhaps you don't understand what's happening here. The girl you crushed is my daughter. You will make things right with me before you ever come within a mile of her." Gabe nodded. "David said you feel very protective of her." "Dr. Soldani, David has no idea what the real truth is. He doesn't know about the pocket watch. But I do, so you can, in fact, explain everything to me. And you are going to. Now." Gabe was beyond shocked. "You know about the pocket watch?" "I just told you I did. Stop stalling." Gabe sighed and nodded. "Then you understand how it works. I went back years ago. I was 20. I thought it was a lark, only I fell in love." Gabe looked down. "I fell so desperately in love. I was willing to leave everything I knew." Everything, sir. My family, my education, my future. Then why didn't you stay? I was killed. I whispered my return word as the young man's body I had entered lay there dying. She was lost to me forever. I'm sorry about that. Mr. Sinclair's expression softened ever so slightly. Ironically, going to the past helped me see my destiny. I returned with a broken heart, but completely committed to becoming a doctor. I always believed that was what Gertrude had intended, but it came at a steep price. Sinclair sighed. It often does, son. I didn't risk my heart again for years. Initially it was self-protection, but eventually I realized it was more than that. It wasn't that I didn't want to love again. I simply never met anyone else with whom I had that kind of spark. Elizabeth was the first woman I ever dated seriously, and that was almost 5 years later. It wasn't exactly the same with her, but I guess I saw things in her that reminded me of my lost love. And yet, you let her go. Yes, sir, I did. I found out on the day we graduated that I didn't really know her. Although I'd asked her about her family numerous times, she always evaded the question. I found out that she was the daughter of Charlotte Matheson and James Quinn when the medical school faculty and the entire graduating class did. I didn't understand why she had hidden this from me. When she told me why later that night, I didn't believe her. I couldn't believe her. How could anyone want to distance themselves from family? Dear God, I know now. Her parents, well, you know. Matheson and Matheson have represented me for years. Charlotte and her father are brilliant attorneys. They've always been available for whatever any of my companies needed. But I understand better why now. So you found love and lost it again. Yes, sir. Then, suddenly, the night of the blizzard, Elizabeth was back in my life, and I was the only person she remembered. I guess I might have wondered about the pocket watch if it hadn't been for that. But you knew how it worked. Some memories push through. I'd forgotten. I also thought souls only went backwards, so I believed Elizabeth was mine again, and I suspect I didn't want to see the inconsistencies for what they were. Odd. It was obvious to the rest of us. It was obvious to the rest of you? Gabriel, I was offered the pocket watch years ago. You went back in time, too. When you said you knew about it, I just thought you meant Elizabeth told you. No, I have first-hand knowledge. But I didn't go back. I came forward and stayed. Gerald Rose went back and returned. Dr. Rose? Wait, Elizabeth said your wife suffered a permanent memory loss. Is she from the past, too? Sinclair nodded. And I'm the only idiot who didn't see it? To be fair, Gertrude sends travelers to see Gerald from time to time. As you can understand, sometimes a traveler returns who needs a little help dealing with the difficult choices they may have been forced to make. After he sees them, he often sends them to me, so we have encountered many more time travelers over the years than you. Maybe the signs are more obvious to us. Why does he send them to you? I was a very young man when I came, and I landed in the body of a foolish boy who had every possible advantage at his fingertips, but valued none of it. The opportunity for education was more of a temptation than I could resist. I stayed. But I left a wife and child in the past. Gabe couldn't hide his shock. I know. It was the selfish choice of a young man with no future. Sir, it's not my place to judge. You couldn't possibly be harder on me than I've been on myself over the years. And your wife? Did she leave a family behind? She left a child. Our child. She was my wife in the past. She would never have stayed, but Gertrude gave her the watch on her deathbed. Joe would have died within hours of returning, leaving our child an orphan anyway. Even so, our greatest regret was not knowing what became of the child we loved. That's why Gerald has sent travelers to me. I had always hoped to meet someone who'd been to my time, to my clan. I hoped to learn what happened to our daughter, but I never did, at least not until Elizabeth. She knew what happened to your daughter? Gabriel, I've already told you. She is my daughter. You mean, I thought you meant she was like a daughter. You can't be serious. I am. So it should be absolutely obvious that the very last thing in the world that I want is for her to return to her own time. I thought she was falling in love with you. Perhaps it was selfish of me, but I had hoped she would love you enough to want to stay. Sinclair's voice hardened. But you've made a complete mess of this. She won't stay because she thinks you love Elizabeth. But I don't. I mean, I do, or I did, but that isn't why I was upset. I realized it was her I'd fallen in love with. I finally found the kind of love I'd only experienced once before, and the thought of losing her... Gabe swallowed hard, trying to hold back tears. I can't lose her, sir. I can't. I want her to stay more than I want my next breath. And if she truly can't stay, if Elizabeth must return, I will beg Gertrude to let me go with the girl who holds my heart. Oldest Sinclair stared at him, as if considering him for a few moments. I want her to stay, and if you can convince her to, I will be eternally grateful. But I know Elizabeth's choice may be what drives everything. I don't want my little one to go back alone. I was prepared to ask Gertrude the same thing. I saw Gertrude the night I figured it out. She said to fix today, and that Elizabeth has her own decisions to make. Then maybe there's a chance she'll choose to stay in the past. It is my fervent prayer. Please, sir, may I see your daughter now? I'll allow you to speak with her and explain all of this, but not tonight. This is not a conversation to have when you are exhausted and have to return to work in mere hours. Mr. Sinclair, it's Wednesday. I have 2 more days to work. This can't wait. There isn't much time. I know that. 23 days at the most. So I am going to interfere. I have money and pull. Go to work tomorrow, and I will see that you are sent home and given Friday off too. I can't ask you. First, you didn't ask me. And second, I suspect you want the new pediatric wing as much as everyone else at NYUHC does. I am about to fully fund that endeavor in exchange for a few days of your time. Would you refuse that offer if you were the chief of pediatrics? No, sir. Then I'm fairly certain you will be sent home before your next shift is over. Then I want you at my house, with flowers and ring in hand. Do you understand me? Yes, sir. Flowers and ring. I'll be there. Just as oldest Sinclair promised, early the next afternoon, Gabe was paged to Dr. Sweeney's office. I'm not sure what you did, Gabe, but the obscenely wealthy Aldous Sinclair has just donated millions of dollars to NYUHC. Every last remaining penny we needed to build the pediatric center. And his only stipulation was for you to be given the rest of today and tomorrow off. Will that be a problem? A problem? Is that a trick question? Sign your patients out to me. I'll finish this shift for you and get coverage tomorrow, or do it myself. Gabe gave Sweeney a quick rundown of his patients. Okay, just let the unit staff know and then get the hell out of here. Millions, Gabe, in one fat check. Thank you for whatever it was you did to put this bug up his ass. Gabe smiled wryly and shrugged. I broke his daughter's heart didn't seem like an explanation Dr. Sweeney would appreciate. On his way home from the hospital, he stopped to buy the requisite flowers. It would have been simple to be traditional and pick up a dozen red roses, but he remembered the morning they had strolled through the flower markets. She had taken such pleasure in seeing the extraordinary variety of blooms, but she had fallen in love with the delicate blue irises. The old woman told her they represented faith and hope. No, roses wouldn't do. He wanted it to mean more. Elizabeth knew flowers had meanings. The old woman agreed. Flowers speak a language of their own. As he looked at the vast array of blossoms, he wanted his choices to mean something, but he didn't speak the language. A woman about his mother's age, wearing a florist's apron, approached him. You look confused. I am confused. I want a bouquet of flowers for the woman I love, I'm going to ask her to marry me." Saying the words aloud brought a broad smile to his face. "I see. Most fellas just go for the red roses." "I know, but I want something unique. I want the flowers to mean more." "Let's see what we can find. You will want at least a few red roses. They are the symbol of passionate love." He grinned. "Yes, I suppose I do." "Do you know what she likes?" "She loves irises, and I know they represent faith and hope." "That is an excellent choice. What else?" "My heritage is Italian. Is there a national flower or something for Italy?" She chuckled. "Some say red roses because of the passionate nature of Italians, but lilies are generally considered symbols of Italy. White lilies are pretty, and they represent purity. Of course, they also represent a secret, but I trust she knows you love her." "A secret?" Well, some of those were about to be revealed, so it seemed perfect. "Okay, white lilies it is." "You said you were Italian. What is her heritage?" He looked at her blankly for a moment. He had never asked Mr. Sinclair from where or when they came, but he remembered something Aldous had said. "I had always hoped to meet someone who had been to my time, to my clan." "She's Scottish." "Well, some thistle would be perfect. We will finish it off with some orange blossoms. You must have those, of course." "What do they represent?" She tusked. "Young people today know nothing. Orange blossoms are the symbol of eternal love, marriage, and, She wiggled her eyebrows. "Fruitfulness." He laughed. "Yes, I must have some of those." Gabe purchased the flowers and practically ran home. He changed his clothes and then retrieved his grandmother's ring from his sock drawer. With the ring in his pocket and the carefully wrapped bouquet in his arms, he took a cab to the Sinclairs' posh Soho address. He gave his name to the security guard on duty at the building. "Good afternoon, Dr. Soldani. Mr. Sinclair is expecting you. Go through to the private elevator, and the security guard there will let the Sinclairs know you're here." Aldous was waiting as Gabe got off the elevator. "I see you took me seriously about the flowers. Well done. Thistle? That's a nice touch. Do you have a ring?" "Yes, sir, I had it before we talked." He pulled the box from his pocket. "It was my grandmother's." Aldous nodded approvingly. "There is nothing more valuable than love that's passed down through generations. My daughter is in the library with her mother. Follow me." Eventually he stopped outside a room with double wooden doors. Aldous gave him a stern look. "You probably only have one chance at this. Don't foul it up." "Yes, sir." Gabe followed him into the enormous room. Elizabeth and Joe Sinclair were sitting at a table. Elizabeth's back was to the door. "Joe, my darling, someone is here to see our girl." Joe looked up. "Gabe, how lovely to see you." Elizabeth's back went rigid, and she didn't turn to look at him. "Yes, it's very nice to see you again, Mrs. Sinclair. How are you?" "Very well, thank you. I trust you've been keeping well?" "Yes, ma'am." "Well, I suspect you aren't here to chat with me. Aldous, shall we give them privacy?" "Yes, my love." Joe rose gracefully and left the room with her husband, closing the door behind them. Elizabeth still hadn't turned around, so Gabe crossed to her. "Do you mind if I sit?" "No, that's fine." She didn't make eye contact. "I brought you these." He handed her the bouquet. She accepted the flowers from him, a slow smile spreading across her face. She traced the petals of one of the irises with a finger. "Faith and hope. They are so beautiful. And the red roses represent love. That's why I'm here, Elizabeth. I love you. I mean, the real you, the girl I've spent the last few weeks with. That's why I became so upset. I knew it was you who I loved, and the idea of you going back, of losing you forever, nearly killed me." "No, Gabe, it isn't me. It can't be me. You were intended for Elizabeth." "I don't believe that. I think I was intended for you." "But that can't happen. Elizabeth will be coming back." "For the next few minutes, let's not think about Elizabeth." "Fine. But why are you so sure you love me and not her? Because I've only experienced the feelings I have for you once before in my life. With Elizabeth? No. It was for a girl I met several years before I met Elizabeth, a girl I could not have. But for the first time since then, I feel the same profound love. There's a connection between us that I can't explain, but you can't deny it. I know you feel it. Yes, I do. But if you felt this before, why did you let it go? It wasn't my choice. It was when I used the watch. I met a girl in the past who I adored. I had decided to give up everything I held dear to stay with her forever. She meant more to me than my family, my education, my very life. But you didn't stay? I couldn't. I was stabbed in the belly. I knew I was dying, so I said the return word. Leaving her was the hardest, most painful thing I've ever done. But I fear losing you will be even worse. More than I've ever wanted anything, I want you to stay and be my wife. If you don't want to stay, or you can't stay, I'll beg Gertrude to let me go back with you. She caressed his cheek. Oh, Gabe, I love you too. His heart leapt for a moment before she uttered the words he had most feared. But there is someone in my own time who I think I was beginning to love. And Elizabeth, what she did was so wonderful. If she wants to return, I have to agree. Tell me what it is Elizabeth has done. According to Gertrude, a neighboring clan needed a skilled midwife. The laird's wife had miscarried 4 babies and was pregnant again. Her husband hoped a different midwife might know what to do. My Aunt Delina was the midwife they were seeking, but Laird McCrae had no intention of sending her. Figuring that no one could help, he intended to send me instead, but I was just an apprentice. He thought to gain Mackenzie as an ally simply by appearing to try to help. Gabe could barely believe what he was hearing. I would not have agreed to that deception, and according to Gertrude, I would have been whipped and ultimately died from my injuries. Perhaps because of the accident, the soul exchange happened earlier than it should have. Elizabeth went back when she lost consciousness, and arrived before I ever had the chance to refuse my laird's command. And she wouldn't refuse, because she has more skills even than your aunt. That's what Gertrude said. So you see, she helped the poor woman and saved my life. I can't refuse to let her return. My darling girl, I have a story to tell you that I think you will find very interesting. About your experience with the pocket watch? He smiled confidently. Yes, and when I'm done, I think you'll agree we belong together. It happened a little over 11 years ago. Chapter 25. Delaware, Route 13, northbound, 11:30 p.m., Monday, December 19th, 1994. Gabe was finally on his way home for Christmas. He had finished with his classes the previous week, but had stayed over the weekend to get a few more shifts at work. People tended to be a little more generous with tips around the holidays, and he needed every cent he could earn. His car was packed before he started his shift, and he left as soon as the restaurant closed. The old Ford Escort he drove didn't have a CD player, but he'd driven the route enough in the last 2.5 years to know where the good radio stations were along the way. With that knowledge, and a large to-go cup of coffee, he was armed for the 3-hour drive to his family's home in New Jersey. Route 13 was fairly deserted this late on a Tuesday night. He hadn't been on the road long when he saw a car pulled over on the shoulder. An elderly woman stood beside a very old sedan and waved to him. This was a rural stretch of road with little late-night traffic and no services within walking distance. It could be ages before someone else helped her. He slowed down and pulled off the road behind her. He got out, but left the engine running and the lights on. Zipping his jacket, he walked to her. "Is everything okay? Do you need help?" "Oh, thank you for stopping, lad. I do need help. I have a puncture." She had some sort of accent, maybe English, but he wasn't sure. "A puncture?" He looked at the car and saw the problem. "Oh, a flat tire." "Aye, a very flat tire." "I can change it for you. Is your spare in the trunk?" "I suppose it is. Let's look, shall we?" She opened the trunk and stepped aside. "Ah, there it is. Thank you so very much. I don't know what I'd have done if you hadn't stopped." "It's no problem at all." He removed the jack and put it together. "What's your name, lad?" "Gabriel Soldani, but you can call me Gabe." "Lovely to meet you, Gabe. My name's Gertrude." Gabe lifted the spare out of the trunk, but as soon as the light from his headlights hit it, he knew they had a problem. Gertrude, how old is this tire?" "It came with the car." "And how old's the car?" "I don't pay much attention to those things, but it's got to be 20 years old, maybe more. Why?" "The spare doesn't have enough air in it, and I think it's dry-rotted." "Oh, dear." "It's usually a good idea to have the spare checked every time you have it serviced." "Serviced?" "Yeah, changing the oil, checking the fluids, rotating and balancing the tires." "Oh, those things. I've been meaning to have those things done. I guess I shall have to now," she said cheerily. "Yeah, that's probably a good idea." The car must be new to her. It wouldn't still be on the road otherwise. Listen, there's no point in putting on a dry-rotted tire. How about I put everything back, you get your things, and lock the car. I'll drive you to where you can get a tow truck. There'll surely be something open in Dover." "That's a fine idea, lad." By the time he'd put the tire and jack back and closed the trunk, she stood waiting with her handbag. He walked to the passenger side of his car and opened the door for her. As he walked around to the driver's side, he remembered the urban legends of axe murderers disguised as little old ladies. He smiled to himself. He wasn't sure of many things, but he was confident Gertrude was not an axe murderer. "I certainly do appreciate this," she said as he pulled into the road. "Several cars passed me and didn't even slow down. You'd think I was an axe murderer or something." What the hell? God, please don't let her be an axe murderer. "So, Gabe, where are you heading so late at night?" "I'm on my way home from college for Christmas." "College, you say? What college?" "Salisbury University in Maryland." "And what are you studying there?" "I'm majoring in biology. I'm in my 3rd year." "That's fascinating. And what do biology majors do when they graduate?" "I had planned to go to medical school." "Had planned?" "I guess I still plan to. It's just, well, I really like music. I play the guitar and piano, and I've fooled around a bit with a mandolin." "A mandolin? That's not very common these days." "My family is Italian. There's an old one at the house that belonged to one of my grandfathers." "I see. So you like music. You could still be a doctor and like music," she teased. "I suppose I can. But right after I went to college, some friends and I formed a band. We're getting really good, and sometimes we get paid gigs. They're talking about going to California after we graduate and trying to, break into the music industry. I think it would be great." "Ah, there's a but hovering at the end of that sentence." Gabe nodded. "But my family, my parents, won't understand. My dad's an electrician and my mom's a housewife. Neither one of them went to college. They're set on me becoming a doctor." "You don't want to be a doctor?" "That's just it, I do, but I want to be a musician too. I'd like to just try it. I want to see what that kind of life would be like. If it didn't work out, I could go to medical school then." "But your parents won't understand." "No. When I mentioned it at Thanksgiving, I thought my mother was going to have a heart attack. You would have thought I'd suggested dealing drugs or something." Gertrude chuckled. "Surely it wasn't that bad." "Oh, trust me, it was that bad. She was calling on every saint in the book. Dad's reaction might have been worse." "What did your dad do?" "Nothing. He said nothing. He did nothing. He just looked so disappointed. It was terrible. So I assured them it was just a crazy idea and that of course I intended to go to medical school. Ah, that is quite a dilemma. I just want to try it. I feel like I'll always regret it if I don't. What if I had a way that you could try the musician's life and it wouldn't interfere with any of your plans? I'd say sign me up. I'm serious, lad. So am I. What do you have in mind? I can give you 60 days as a musician. I don't have 60 days. I don't have to go back to school until February, but I'm supposed to take an MCAT prep course in January. You needn't worry about those things. I'll explain, but you must promise to set aside your disbelief and listen to the whole story before you say anything. Okay, sure. He wasn't sure where this was going, but it was entertaining. I have the ability to let you time travel. He cast a sideways glance at her. Are you serious? Remember, suspend disbelief and listen before you comment. Okay, sorry. She opened her purse and pulled out what looked like a pocket watch on a chain. This pocket watch is a conduit through time. It allows your soul to trade places with someone else's. You put it around your neck or in your pocket before you go to sleep. When you wake up, you will be in someone else's body in another time. You'll have all of your memories. You'll be able to speak whatever language that person speaks. It'll sound just like English to you. A few other memories belonging to that person may leak through as well. Gabe could barely believe what he was hearing. The woman was nuts. She really believed what she was saying. You have 60 days. She opened the watch. Glancing at it, he noticed it only had one hand that seemed to be stopped at 12. Each day that you're in the past, the hand will advance 1 second. Before you go to sleep, you must pick a word, one you wouldn't use accidentally, and you tell the watch. It is your return word. Any time you say it within those 60 days, you'll be brought back to your own body immediately. You don't even need to have the watch on you. But I don't have 60 days. Gabe, why are you engaging a crazy woman? I am not crazy, and you don't need 60 days. I told you that. Only 60 seconds will pass here. How? Whose body will I be in, and where will they be? You will pop into the body of a professional musician. He will have done something that will ultimately result in his death, and you will do something the instant you arrive to stop that. I'll save his life. Not exactly. His life was over. You extend it only by the amount of time you stay there. When you leave, he will die. His soul will go on, and you will return to your own body mere seconds after you left it. Gabe's mind whirled. She didn't seem crazy. What she said was impossible to believe. But wow, if it did work, how cool would that be? All I have to do is put the watch around my neck, tell it a word, and go to sleep? I'll be in someone else's body for 60 days. Does it automatically bring me back then? Nay, you must choose to say the word. If you don't, you'll stay there forever. If I stay there, what happens to my body here? It will die, and the other person's soul goes on as it should. What harm was there in trying? The worst thing is that I wake up in the morning with the watch around my neck, feeling silly. Gabe, you said that you feared you'd always regret it if you didn't give the musician's life a try. I'm giving you the opportunity to live the life of a professional musician for 60 days. The pocket watch will take 60 seconds or less of your time. Don't you think you'd regret not at least trying it? It was so tempting. If he could just try it, just taste life as a musician, he'd know what to do with his life. There was no risk with this. Okay, I'll try it. Good. I hope you have a wonderful time and learn a bit about yourself in the process. She handed him the watch. He put it in his pocket. Thank you, Gertrude. You're welcome. How will I get it back to you? Oh, the watch always manages to be where it needs to be. It'll find me. Now look there, ahead at the next exit. There is a service station. I expect I can get a tow truck there. Sure enough, there was a sign in the station window. Carl's 24-hour towing. Gabe pulled in. He started to get out of the car, intending to help her out and make certain she could get a tow, but she stopped him. "There's no need to get out, lad. I'm sure Carl will be able to help me. You've got a couple hours left to drive, and I don't want to keep you any longer. Drive carefully. Watch out for drunks." She was already out of the car, so he leaned across and rolled down the window. "Bye, Gertrude. Thanks again." It was after 2 a.m. when Gabe parked in front of his home. The outside Christmas lights were still on. Mum must have left them on for him. He grabbed his backpack and locked the car. He would unload tomorrow. He slipped in the house as quietly as he could. Their dog, Chase, met him at the door. That was odd, because Chase usually slept with Angela. It only took him a moment to realize why. Angela was curled up on the sitting-room couch asleep. "She snuck downstairs, did she, boy?" Chase whined. "Don't worry, I've got this." He put his backpack down and lifted his sleeping baby sister off the couch. She roused a little. "I was waiting up for you." He chuckled. "I see, but Chase wants to go to bed now." "Okay." She yawned and closed her eyes again. He carried her upstairs and tucked her in. Chase jumped onto the bed, curling up beside her. "Sleep tight, princess." He made his way back downstairs to the bedroom on the main floor that he shared with Joey and Nick when he was home. He kicked off his shoes and shrugged out of his jacket, dropping it on the floor by the bed. It hit with a dull thud. The pocket watch. He fished it out and laid it on the bed while he finished undressing. Climbing under the covers in his T-shirt and boxers, he held the pocket watch in his hand for a moment. "Well, here goes nothing." "Angela Rose," he whispered to the watch before slipping the chain round his neck and going to sleep. It felt as if Gabe had just barely closed his eyes when he awakened to find himself on the back of a pony on a dirt road in a forest. Holy shit, a frickin' pony? He was supposed to be in a musician's body. He looked down. What in hell was he wearing? Was this some kind of joke? Was he some sort of Renaissance fair performer? That couldn't be right, because it was bitter cold and spitting snow. They weren't usually held in winter. He looked up again and the world spun. For some reason he found it very funny and started giggling. Giggling? Christ, what's the matter with me? His speech sounded so strange. "You're drunk," said a familiar voice. "Gertrude?" She stepped out of the forest. The well-dressed, refined woman he had helped on the side of the road in Delaware wore a voluminous cloak over clothing as old-fashioned as his own. "Aye, lad. So you tried the pocket watch. Well done." "I don't understand." His head swam and he broke out in a cold sweat. "Damn, I think I'm going to puke." He started to get off the pony. "Don't climb down, lad. He's not that big, but you might not be able to get back up, and you'll freeze to death. Just hang on to the beast's neck and try to miss your clothes." Gabe barely had time to throw his arms round his noble steed's neck before he vomited spectacularly. After he heaved several times, he groaned. "Oh, God, this is awful." "You've never been drunk before?" "Nay." The mere thought of it, combined with the sour taste of alcohol, caused him to spew more of the contents of his stomach. He inhaled several deep breaths of the fresh air, trying to regain control. "And I sure as hell never will be again." "There now, that's already one good lesson you've learnt. Just more proof that the universe unfolds as it should." She stepped onto the path a few paces in front of the pony and clicked to it. "Come on to Gertrude now. There's a good lad. I'd rather keep my shoes clean." The pony took several steps away from the mess on the ground. The old woman pulled what looked like a pottery flask in a leather case from her cloak. "Here's a costrel of water. Rinse your mouth with it, you'll feel better." He followed her instructions and handed the costrel back to her. Nay, lad, keep it. You can give me that wine-skin hanging over your shoulder, though. You'll not want to drink any more of that sour wine, anyway. He handed it to her. It's yours. I'll never drink again. Gertrude chuckled. All things in moderation. You will want to try the ale here. What's served most of the time is very low in alcohol, and may be better for you than water, all things considered. Even the little children drink it. Just be careful not to over-imbibe the stronger stuff. Exactly where is here? You said I'd get to try a professional musician's life. And that is exactly what you are. You are a professional travelling minstrel in the Scottish Highlands. It is Tuesday, the 20th day of December. The day I left? Aye, except over 7 centuries earlier. 'Tis the year of our Lord, 1278, a Tuesday. The 13th century? Are you jesting? She chuckled again. I am most certainly not jesting. This isn't what I thought. I mean, you never said. I said you'd go back in time. I know you did, but I thought maybe to the 60s. Did I imply that? Gabe thought hard. With the wine-befuddled body he was in, it took great effort. Nay, I suppose you didn't. Did you ask? Nay, I know I didn't. Then whose fault is it? I know it's my own, but I never imagined you'd send me to the Dark Ages, and why does my voice sound so odd? Your voice sounds odd to you because it isn't your voice. 'Tis the voice of the minstrel your soul currently resides in. And don't be so quick to judge. There is much to be learnt and enjoyed here in the Dark Ages. You could have fooled me. She laughed outright. Poor lad. All of the misery of the morning after, without the frivolity of the night before. Gabe groaned. I think I'll just go home. That's up to you, but it's as I said to you before. You'll regret it if you don't give it a try. You also said I'd do something to stop this man from dying. What do I have to do? You've already done it. You gave me the wineskin. The miserable sot into whose body you landed would have just kept drinking it until it killed him. How? She shrugged. One of several things. He would have fallen from his mount. That alone could have done him in, if he'd landed on his full head. It's also blue cold out this evening. While it's commonly believed alcohol warms you, it really doesn't. It causes the blood vessels in your skin to open, making you feel warm. If you're out in the cold, that actually allows you to lose body heat rapidly. He could have frozen to death. Then again, as you are painfully aware, he was drunk enough to be sick. He could have aspirated... You don't say it. I get the picture. And you're going to be a doctor. I'll never be a sick, drunk doctor. I'll swear that to you. Don't make things worse now. She smiled broadly at him. It was peculiar, but she looked almost proud. I won't. You're a good lad, Gabriel Soldani. These 60 days are a gift that you'll treasure if you give it the chance. He nodded. But what do I do now? If you stick to this road, it'll bring you to a village surrounding a castle. Go to the castle and tell them you're a minstrel. The Christmas season is upon us, and extra minstrels are nearly always welcome for major feasts. You'll find that lute slung over your back is much like a mandolin. You'll have no trouble playing it. Both of you are very talented. If you allow it, his melodies will guide your fingers. All right, I'll try it. You remember your return word? Aye. I believe you'll find the watch round your neck, under your clothes. Don't let anyone see it. Watches haven't been invented yet. How do I explain not having any memory? You won't need to. He's alone in the world. His entire family died by the time he was 10 and 5. No one here knows him. He is essentially a man without a past, absolutely perfect for a time traveller. She pulled a silver coin from her pocket. On the way into town, stop at the inn to stable your pony. Give this coin to the innkeeper for the pony's care. Maybe I should just give the innkeeper the pony. After all, I won't be needing it again. That's not necessarily true. You just never know. Besides, it would raise suspicion. No minstrel would give away a mount if he had one. All right. Is there anything else I need to know? Gertrude nodded sagely. You must remember, love is a marathon, not a sprint. He laughed. Wise words, I'm sure. But is there anything I need to know to get by here? I can't think of anything else. Off to the castle I go. Will I see you again? Only time will tell, lad. Then I'll say farewell, Gertrude. Gabe started to ride away slowly. Gertrude called to him. Now that I think on it, there is one more thing you should know. What's that? Your name, lad. You're called Jordy.